to the Dignity Dialogue with your host, Joe Kittinger.
All right, welcome to another Dignity Dialogue with Joe Kittinger. I, of course, am in the wonderful presence of April Johnson.
Hi, Joe.
Hi, April.
I'm good.
As we bring to you more great folks who are trying to make a dent in the universe when it comes to dignity and how we treat people through the lens of leadership and the power of business. I think business is often not realized as a place of huge opportunity to grow families, to grow people through examples, through great leadership. You know, a lot of folks that we've talked to in the past say, I'm raising my kids different because I had a great leader, who treated me a certain way. And so this is a life thing. It's not a business thing, because business is life.
So true. So true.
And our guest today believes in all of these things. His name is Tom Hardison. He is with the Generative Leadership Group. Tom, welcome to our podcast. Why don't you give our audience a little bit of background about who you are and your business, and then we can get into the subject of leadership.
Sure. Well, thank you, April and Joe, for having me on your podcast today. Wonderful to have this conversation.
Thank you.
At Generative Leadership Group, I work with executive CEOs and their leadership teams to really help them generate leadership for themselves, for their team, and for their organization. And I view leadership as a practice that we become what we practice. And if we want to become better at leadership, we need to just put it into practice every day.
It reminds me of doctors. They always say I'm in my practice, and I show up and go, can we be done practicing? Because now it's my body you're working on.
Doctors didn't come into my mind at all in that. But you know what did come into my mind is a phrase that I use often. We practice makes permanent.
Permanent.
That whatever we practice, it becomes permanent. And so practicing good leadership becomes permanent, becomes a part of who we are. And that's kind of exciting when you think about it,
Well, practical application. So there's so much to talk about, but we often refer to it as like a golf game, right? Tom, I can watch Tiger Woods videos all day long. I can learn all about golf. I can even go and hit balls with a coach for a while on the tee range. But how do I really learn golf, Tom?
You get out on the course and you play.
That's right. And sometimes it's intimidating, right? Because when I'm on that course, Tom, I've got people behind me laughing at me, Tom. Laughing at me as I'm driving the ball 25 yards forward to barely the woman's tee, if that, and I'm just hitting and hitting and hitting. That's how my golf game started. Now I can hit it maybe 100 yards while they're still driving 350. But we have to get out on that course, even when we're not feeling comfortable, just to try to get better. I think would you say it's a journey just to improve oneself a little bit every day?
It is. And we can approach it in many different ways. We could pursue it as a lifelong journey of mastery. Opportunity to just continue to refine and improve and get better and better and better. Or we could just assume we know what we do and just show up and apply what we do. And sometimes we do that. We kind of dabble at this and dabble at that. I think the opportunity to really generate leadership in ourselves and those around us is to take responsibility for developing that capacity, generating better and better outcomes along the way.
I love that. It's true. I mean, what's your mindset when you approach leadership? That's a good reminder for us as we bring even our younger leaders through our programs. Like, this is not just cross it off the list. You're learning this thing in this period of time. Think about this as a lifelong journey, and this is part of your journey of becoming a better leader. And what one or two things you're going to take away from this one experience that you can get in your game to improve your leadership?
Oh, absolutely. And, journey, you've been You've been on some journeys. As I was looking at some of the notes about you and your life, and you've done a lot of international work. You've been to lots of different places. I love travel. It's one of my favorite things. I like to go on mission trips and dive into other cultures and kind of live with them and see how they function and what their culture is all about. And you have a little bit of that too. Can you share a little bit of what it was like to maybe see culture and leadership in different parts of the world?
Yeah. Well, part of it was my parents traveled. I was born in the Netherlands. My dad was going to school there. Awesome. And so we lived in Europe for my first year of my life, and then back to the U.S. in multiple places, and then went to Venezuela when I was in high school. And so just as a 16-year-old going to a different country and trying to figure out how to make my way in a different language and sort through what do I do here? What can I contribute? I got to work for a couple of summers there, construction on expanding a dam. And so a fascinating experience, being a mechanic's helper, going to the tool bin to get tools when they wanted me to do that. And being the gringo, they weren't really sure what I could really do. So that took a while.
Okay, so lessons, this is fun.
Out.
Okay, so like we're these seasoned individuals now. I can tell distinct lessons I learned from my leaders at 16 years of age. Mm-hmm. So at that precious age, what did you learn back then that you still kind of have in the back of your mind, today?
Right. It's dependability and making sure that I knew what successful completion of tasks and projects would look like, and that I could follow through to do that, and that I could communicate where I was, and I could ask for help when I needed it. Yeah. So I didn't have to do it all by myself. I needed to ask for help and let people know when I needed it.
That's a huge lesson.
Totally. Now, you worked for Hewlett-Packard during some very key years of change, especially in the technology industry. We all know computers went a long way, right? Yeah. So what years were you there? And tell us some of the lessons you've learned from the Hewlett-Packard experience. They certainly have a wonderful reputation for leadership. There's been a lot written about that company.
Yeah. So I started in 1984, February of 1984. So just about this time. And I started as a process engineer in the manufacturing of personal computers. And HP had, the previous year, had just introduced their touchscreen computer, and before anybody else was doing it. And we were figuring out how to scale that business. And I was working on simplifying the production process and applying some of the Toyota production system just-in-time model to PC manufacturing. I spent 7 years in manufacturing and distribution, and then another 7 years in product development, and then worked on merger integration and overall cross-business activities to improve the company over my 28 years. And so what I'd say HP did extremely well was build an environment that supported people doing their best work and creative work. And that came from Bill and Dave as the founders. They were still involved when I was starting with the company. And so I got to pick up and learn from their approach. And it started with their personal beliefs about what a company was there for. A company's there to provide value, to make a difference for people and society. And that to do that, they needed to provide the environment for people to do their best work. Trust and respect for every individual was a core value. And another core value was we achieve our shared objectives through teamwork. So learning how to get things done, every single project I worked on, was in a team.
Wow.
Sometimes I was co-leading a team. Sometimes I was part of a team that someone else was leading. But we never, we had tasks that we had to do individually, and they all funneled through a team to get something done across functions and organizations.
That's a great background for the wealth of information you bring to your business. Cross-functional teams are much different than even running a specialized department where you know everybody and you have to reach out. What have you learned the difference between, or just some observations between running your personal team, like let's say you're a departmental team, versus then having to lead cross-departmental teams? What's the biggest difference leaders should realize?
Well, first, it's finding what's the purpose of the team. So often in those that report directly to us, we've got specific responsibilities we need to fulfill. And we focus on what are those responsibilities and how do we do those well. And that leads to optimizing how we get those responsibilities done. When we need to work for a business initiative that requires multiple functions to be able to get something done, now we're focusing on, well, what's the purpose for the business? What are the key stakeholders that we're serving across the business and outside the business? And what do we need to do, and how do we bring the strengths of the different functions together to achieve that, whether it's creating and introducing and launching a new product, to creating a new service, figuring out how to make it easy for customers and other people to interact with us across many different divisions. So when the internet came along, HP was pretty decentralized, and having divisions create multiple websites made it really complicated for customers to figure out where they could get information. So we had to figure out, how do we operate as one company on behalf of a customer, when internally we're very focused on separate pieces and parts. So that was it. It's a challenge, and it requires collaboration and working toward a shared objective and defining that shared objective to pursue.
Yeah, it's also the clear vision from the top, cascading to the next level, of what we're trying to accomplish, how we expect you to collaborate or behave in that drive, and then the team deciding what are the steps and actions that need to be required to meet the chosen objective.
Absolutely. And I can't help but think about if there's ever a way to test this idea of dignity and respect, it would be in collaboration. You know, there was this time historically, and you talked about it a little bit with Hewlett-Packard. When you were with Hewlett-Packard, there was a shift. That was a time period in history when it was shifting the type of leadership that was coming to work every day,
right, and
the expectation that was put upon people at work. It was very individual. Before that, then we started kind of this collaborated and having to be together in teams, like you talked about, and kind of learning how do I not maybe try to push my idea. My idea has value, but your idea has value as well. And we talk. I may have a card in my pocket that says I might not be right.
Right. I might be wrong.
I could be wrong. Right. And so that whole idea around collaboration, and now you see historically when 2020 hits and everybody goes home and some of those kinds of things, and now we're kind of sliding back into that art of collaboration. It's very difficult to collaborate. I mean, it's just been a part of our work, but it's difficult to collaborate.
It can be very difficult, and that's where Brene Brown's work on like vulnerability, rumble language, humility is the key to proper collaboration, because it's very easy for the ego to get involved and try to prove your point that you're right, and you want to say to the boss, that was my idea, that I came up with that. I was just curious, Tom, from your perspective, how you have when you were doing your cross-functional teams, how was vulnerability and humility used in a practical sense to unite teams? Because I think people are very confused over that word. They go vulnerable, like, oh no, like sharing every pain I ever have. It's like, no, it doesn't have to be that deep.
Right.
It doesn't have to be that intense. It's more about so could you provide some examples of what that really looks like, when in a collaborative setting?
Yeah, in a collaborative setting, as you said, leadership may have set some objectives, provided a vision of what they wanted to do. So a really good example was I was working in helping create and launch the first HP color laser jet printer. And the goal was to introduce it in 1992. And the technology wasn't ready. And so the team we had to come back to the leadership team and say, we're not going to be able to introduce it this year. The schedule, we've got to make changes to really deliver a useful product to customers, and we need to adjust the schedule. So vulnerability is to say, yes, I understand the objective, and here's all the things we're doing, and here's the gap. So we have a choice. We could deliver a product that might not meet expectations from our assessment and meet a schedule, or we could adjust a schedule. Not an easy conversation to have.
Right.
And we can get our personal egos and identity tied to that. So the challenge, and this is part of how we generate leadership, is be able to shift and say, I'm here for leadership for the sake of what? It's not just for me, it's for the sake of a greater purpose.
Yeah.
So if I'm here to help us achieve a greater purpose, how can I be open and honest about what's really needed to serve that purpose, and recognize, yes, that message may not be well received initially. At some point, we'll have to deal with it as an organization.
I love that's a great example of real life.
Yes.
Vulnerability question. I'm wondering, when it comes to generative leadership, do you have like 3 or 5 key elements that you focus your executives around to help a person kind of put their head around the entire concept?
Yeah. So I break it into a few steps and things that we can do as individual leaders. First is become a really good observer of ourselves and how we're acting in different situations. What situations trigger us? Where might we go? Concept from conscious leadership. Diane Chapman and Jim Detmeyer got a beautiful video of above the line and below the line. So when I get triggered by events that feel like threats, I can go below the line and become fearful, needing to be right. And so just noticing, when does that happen? That happens to all of us as human beings. We all get triggered by events. If you think of the last time you were driving on a busy interstate and someone cut right in front of you, almost hit you as they were trying to thread the needle between you and another car. I know for me, I get triggered. I grip the wheel harder. Words fly out of my mouth before I know what I'm saying.
That's right.
About the other person.
Right, of course. Yeah, because you've never done that, have you, Tom? I've never
done that.
Never shred the needle. So that.
Yes, I've done that. Yes, I've done that.
Well, you know what? I got a few choice words for you, Tom.
Yes, try it. And I've always thought I was doing the right thing. So again, the need to be right shows up. So part of it is accepting those are normal human biology and beginning to recognize when those things happen in me and recognize I do have a choice.
Yes.
I can come back to being more grounded and centered. I can come back to being present with what's going on and set what triggered me aside for the moment and become curious about, well, what's really going on here? What might be happening for the other person? What are the other perspectives that I'm not seeing? The question April mentioned earlier, how could I be wrong?
Mm-hmm.
So being first an observer and being able to see our own reactions helps us begin to see when they might be occurring in those around us, because they do. Mm-hmm. And we can notice, well, how might my energy influence their energy? So
I love that. I love that. And you mentioned curious, which reminded me that you had taken our snapshot. You went out and did your survey and did the Dignify snapshot. Thanks for doing that. And you have curious in your top 5. So you're driven by that sense of curiosity and getting to the bottom of things and asking questions and wanting to have that better understanding of it. And having that also, you had, I remember seeing that you had persistent in your top 5, which I too have persistent in my top 5. So I feel like we're kindred spirits now, Tom. But, just wanting to be driven by those things. And so I'm kind of curious, what was it like for you to take the snapshot and learn a little bit about those top 5 traits of yours, and seeing, as you're talking today, I'm like, wow, I see that. I see curious in him.
Yeah, he is calm, good listener, curious, organized, and persistent.
He's a great listener, I can tell already.
And totally chill. You have a vibe that says, I'm safe, come talk to me.
I'm not sure it's in that voice.
It's not that voice. Is that creepy? Was that a creepy voice?
If it comes with a white van,
but he's got that kind of raspy, experienced voice, that says calm. Even your voice tone is calm, Tom.
It's amazing.
It's like a superpower. I'm a little jealous.
Well, thank you. People have mentioned it. And part of it is just trying to make sense. So I went through a lot of changes in my life. I went to 6 different elementary schools from kindergarten to 6th grade because we moved. And so just figuring out, this is new territory. How do I explore new territory? And so that's what it was like to go through the survey, the dignity assessment, and understand, here's a new lens from which I can observe myself and see what are the things that work for me. How might I be more effective partnering in conversation with other people? What works for them?
Yeah.
So I had a rich conversation with Joe about a month ago, just trying to understand. He wanted to understand more of my top 5, and I wanted to understand more of his top 5 and his fun-loving.
I am fun-loving.
He is.
Yeah.
I have fun in my top 5, Tom.
I recall that. Yes.
Yeah. You might get exhausted from that over a period of time.
I could, and that'd be, and this is where I'd need to be vulnerable and say, hey, Joe, I know we're having lots of fun, and I've reached my limit. I need to calm down a little bit.
Absolutely. Just knowing each other's dignity, right? How we're all wired, and not misinterpreting it, and that's also part of creating great teams. We have to know each other's strengths, So for you to say get curious is like your superpower. Telling me to get curious might be more difficult for me to get my head around because I'm not wired to always think that way, right? Where your upbringing, which totally forms who we are. I can imagine if you're running around changing your environment, right, 6 times in your formative childhood years to create this gift of calm while everything is changing around you, you can see that worked for you, right? That worked for you to listen to others, get curious, and then figure out how you're going to insert yourself and organize this new life. It's where our superpower comes from. And a lot of people don't know what their superpower is. Yeah. And I think burnout comes from, and let's talk about burnout because every employee feels burnout at some point. Most employees feel burnout at some point. I think burnout occurs when you are going against or you're asked to do your job outside of your natural wiring. I think that's where burnout comes in, because people look at my schedule and go, oh my gosh, you must be so burned out. I'm like, no, because I'm living my top 5 all the time. Yeah. I'm able to inspire. I can have fun with Tom. And then Tom can take a nap when he's done talking to me. But we can have fun together. We can talk about inspiring things, which is part of my top 5 and your top 5. Yep. So I think when folks go, I'm burned out, it's because they're forced to go against maybe a natural flow of how they prefer to get the job done, being forced. What do you think of that, Tom?
Well, I got a couple of thoughts. So I got burned out, and part of the reason I left HP when I did was I reached the place where I felt I wasn't growing. I was stuck, and that was both professionally and personally. So our youngest son was struggling with anxiety and depression at 16, and I needed to be more present. I was traveling, so part of my burnout was I was traveling just about every week, leave on Monday morning early, come back late Friday night, exhausted on the weekend. So I wasn't really present for my wife and my son and our older 3 sons. And I was in a situation where I wasn't sure how to really have an impact. The business had changed. We had outside CEOs come in with different beliefs and different values. So the culture had shifted over my last 10 years, 12 years at HP. So I was adjusting to a different environment and realized, I've got to go figure out how to grow my leadership, both for me, my family, and for whatever I do in the future. So I got started into different programs. And what I quickly learned is the program is useful, as we talked about earlier. It gives me intellectual understanding, gives me awareness of things, and it doesn't really change what I'm doing until I start to put it into practice. And what I think is most difficult and causes burnout for people in organizations is that we can feel alone.
Yeah.
And we don't have a social structure where we're learning and supporting and helping each other. And so generative leadership and providing dignity for people is providing that social structure that enables us to feel like we belong, that we're part of something bigger than ourselves, that we can make a difference, and we can learn and grow our capacity to lead our lives and our participation in the organization.
That social structure is so overlooked. We have love events at Profit Co. Living our values, LOV, and where we just go out and have some fun. And we incorporate a little bit of fun into just meetings too as well. And so it's because, some of us have fun in our top 5, as you learned. So I'm very social. Yeah. And my wife is very social. So the 2 owners are very social. So we make things very social, right? Because that's how we're made up. But to the point of being deliberate in social structure, I think is really new for me.
And I think the other part of that is that it's also there is a deliberateness to it. You guys are very social, so we have that element, but we also have other people on the team that have a quieter sense of social, right? And so it's not just that every love event that we have has to be this wild, crazy thing in order to be social, but that it can also be, just a few weeks ago, we spent an hour and a half here as a team working on listening skills and having some fun activities with everybody in the office, learning how to become better listeners. And that was such a wonderful, refreshing element for those people who maybe aren't so maybe big and bold in those areas. But you start to realize we have to get to where everybody is, right? I have to reach you where you are. And I can bridge. We talk a lot around here about bridging. I need to bridge to where you are, and you can bridge to where I am. We kind of find this safe space where we feel like we're in this together, but not because I've left all myself back there. But because I've brought a piece of myself and you've brought a piece of yourself, and now we get to do this really cool thing that we couldn't do without the other.
Yeah. It's almost like a litmus test, the social structure. I bet when you look at a company and you analyze, a culture, that'd be one of the things you test. Do you have a social interaction?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Is that what you do, Tom? I mean, do you help people create a social structure? I mean, I'm sure a lot of folks you work with haven't even thought of that, like maybe because they're not motivated for that, or, they think the Christmas party is their social structure and that's about it. So talk to us more about that. I know I'm personally intrigued with it.
Yeah. So I build on what April mentioned. The opportunity to practice listening can also be an opportunity to practice telling a story, and inviting each person to share a story about what they've learned, about what they've experienced, about their work in progress, whatever that may be. It gives the people in the true storytelling kind of environment an opportunity to listen deeply to what are we learning from the other person. And we don't need to comment. We don't need to coach. We just accepting the other person's and their story of where they are builds safety. It builds trust. It allows an opportunity for truth to emerge, and it opens opportunities. So I've been learning and participating in true storytelling circles over the past 2.5 years on a weekly basis with people. And it's a incredibly powerful way to build social structure, to build insight, and to bring people together with common bonds.
That's very cool. How does someone start that?
Yeah.
I know you said what April said, but is there more of like a 1, 2, 3 of getting started and building social structure?
Well, there's David Bogie, who's a professor in New Mexico, helped create true storytelling circles. There's a True Storytelling Institute, I believe. I'll look it up and I'll send you the link.
You're so
to
sweet.
it.
Thank
That's
you.
great.
So that you can put it on the podcast for
Yes.
people that want to go take a look at it. Yeah. And they provide the steps to really help people build those true storytelling circles. And it takes just what we're doing today.
Yeah.
Wow.
You invited me to share some of my story, and you've also shared some of your story.
Mm-hmm.
And just being able to listen and accept, wow, here's your experience, figuring out how to make your way through life and business.
Mm-hmm.
And what a difference that gives me ideas. And, oh, here are things I haven't considered that I could consider doing.
Yeah.
I love it.
So, Tom, if someone were to reach out to you, what could they expect when working with you?
Yeah. First is just a discovery conversation. What would you want to, what are you interested in doing? Kind of where are you today? Where do you want to be?
Mm-hmm.
And what's getting in the way? What's that gap that seems like you're not able to close, that you would want to reach out and ask for my assistance in making that journey possible? So that'd be a discovery conversation. And then we'd figure out, does it make sense to work together, and in what capacity? And we'd put together a scope and go from there.
Sure. So just so people understand, are you more of a one-on-one coach, or are you a combination of?
Combination. I coach individuals. I coach leadership teams. And I help leadership teams figure out how are they going to generate the leadership around them. So this is my favorite quote from Peter Drucker is, the first and foremost job of a leader is to take charge of our energy and then to help orchestrate the energy of those around us. So I help leaders do that. I help leadership teams do that.
And how do people find you? Where do we find you in the world?
I'm on LinkedIn, Tom Hardison on LinkedIn, and my website is generativeleadershipgroup.com.
Awesome. Any final thoughts that you could leave our audience with when it comes to encouraging them as leaders?
Yeah, from what you took me through, Joe, I think learning more about dignity and putting into practice dignity conversation.
Yeah.
So I talked about leadership as a practice. You help people do that. And I think that's incredibly valuable in the world. It provides a safe space for everyone to learn and grow.
We help people do that, Tom. We help people do it. You do too. We do, right?
Yes.
And that's that's
fun to do.
I love the podcast world. It really makes the world a little smaller. And I love talking to, you, Tom, and just our businesses are so parallel as far as what we want to help people do, but our perspectives are going to always be unique. And I think that's where the magic comes in, when true collaboration can happen. And thanks to technology that HP helped along the way, we're able to have conversations with folks all over the place. So thank you for taking time out of your day to share your wisdom with us and to share the conversation and your stories. And we want you to. We hope everything is great. We hope we keep our ties together as we continue to grow in this world.
I look forward to it, and thank you very much for the conversation as well.
It has been our pleasure.
Our pleasure. This is Joe Kettinger with April and our guest Tom with another Dignity Dialogue. If you want to get after your leadership, reach out to us. Let's talk about it. If Tom resonates with you, reach out to Tom. These conversations don't cost anything but your time, and they could open your world up to the whole next level of leadership. Tap in. We can't do it alone. We need each other. Have a great rest of your day.
This has been the Dignity Dialogue with Joe Kettinger. Talk at you later.